Thanks for joining JavaScript webinar. Today's topic is how to build custom Dojo widgets. So this topic, number 13, is what we are going to cover today. And on Monday, we are going to cover some advanced topics of Dojo Toolkit, module system, and object-oriented programming, and object store. And then we're going to move on to jQuery. So let's move on to the presentation. Building custom Dojo widgets. So what we're going to do today is trying to build custom Dojo widget from basic feature to advanced features. So we're going to actually try 8 different features of building Dojo widgets. So let's move on with the first step, creating DOM tree yourself manually through JavaScript. Before we move on to building our custom widget, so let's talk about what is and why you want to build custom widgets. Widgets are UI component, and Dojo widget system, which is called the Digit, provides comprehensive set of widgets as we learned last week. And there are also third-party and community provided widgets as well. However, there could be situations where those widgets do not meet your needs. Maybe it's not performing as good as you need to be, and it might not provide special behavior you want, and it might not provide special animation you want. So whatever reasons, you might have to come up with your own widget. You might extend the existing widgets, or you can create widgets from scratch. So how to create Dojo custom widgets? You are going to use Dojo declare. So this is something that we have not covered yet. On Monday, we are going to cover Dojo object-oriented programming API, which includes Dojo.declare. So Dojo.declare is basically you are creating a class. In this case, I'm actually creating my widget class, extending this to base class. So you are typically extending digit underscore widget and digit underscore templated or template mixed in base classes. Okay, so just remember, and we're going to actually use this scheme in the rest of the presentation. Now, first, we are going to build simplest possible widget by creating DOM tree ourselves through JavaScript coding, and this is actually rarely used. So it's rarely used because creating and manipulating DOM tree manually through JavaScript coding is very hard. Instead, typically you're going to use a template for building DOM tree. So in this step, we are going to actually try to show you how you can create a custom widget, just building a DOM tree yourself manually. And then from the second step, we are going to use template. Okay, so the base class we talked about was digit underscore widget base. So this is a base class for all widgets. Okay, so whether that is a custom widget or built-in widget, they all extend this widget base. Now, this widget base has a set of properties. Okay, this set of properties actually provide, they are called the lifecycle properties because those properties are in fact functions. And in some cases, it's functions that are going to be invoked as a lifecycle method. For example, creation and destruction, basically the methods of this base class will be invoked. So what you can do is you can provide implementation of these properties. You are in fact overriding these properties. So two important properties, lifecycle properties are build rendering and post create. So build rendering here, this is the property, meaning this is a method that you are going to create a DOM tree yourself by using JavaScript code. Again, this is rarely used. Instead, you're going to use a template, but in this particular step, we are going to create a DOM tree ourselves. And then there is what is called the post create property, which contains methods for whatever major functionality that you want to implement for that particular widget. Okay, so this post create is this by the time this method represented by this post create property represent, the widget has been rendered. Okay, so you should be able to, so DOM tree has been created because this build rendering has been called, and then you can do whatever you want, for example associating some event handlers to it. Now these are two important methods of this base class, but if you want to actually see other lifecycle methods of this base class, you can click this the website, and you can see this is the API, widget base class API, and you can see it does have a constructor method, and so these are in fact the set of steps when the widget gets created. Okay, so in this case parameters are mixed into the widget instance, and the post mixed properties, and then build rendering property basically contains function. So this is a method where you can actually create a DOM tree for your widget, and then setters are called, and then post create. So again, this is the major functionality that you want to actually implement for your widget. And then there are a few other things like a startup and destroy. So destroy method will be invoked when obviously that the widget is destroyed. Okay. All right, so moving forward, so let's do our first exercise. So we are going to try this 8 steps step by step. So this is actually we are actually trying to build the counter widget, and here we are going to create widget DOM tree ourselves. Okay, so basically, so let's actually see the code. So this is a AMD style API coding, so we require all these modules. Okay, and so here you are going to use declare, so again Dojo declare for creating your counter widget class, and here we are extending the widget base class. Okay, now here we are overriding 2 properties, build, rendering, and post create. So here we are creating this DOM tree ourselves by using create method of DOM constructor object. So here basically we are creating a button, and then inner HTML of that button we are providing this counter value. And in post create we are providing event handler. So for this DOM node, whenever this widget, in this case this DOM node represents the whole widget, so whenever this widget is clicked, we want to call this increment function, which is basically incrementing the value of this counter, and then we are setting inner HTML of this widget. Okay, and then we are also actually when everything's ready, we are going to parse ourselves. Okay, all right, and then we have so this is the definition of your widget. Okay, and now you are going to use your widget just like any other widget of Dojo. So you're going to use the data Dojo type, and then you specify the name of your widget. Okay, so let's run this application. So I'm going to run this application as a web application. So I'm going to click this one. Now this is a widget, so if I click this one, it's just incrementing the value. Okay, all right, so let's see the code one more time. So here we are declaring our widget called the counter, and then we are using it. Okay, so we actually define our the counter widget extending just widget base class. Okay, so digit widget base class, and we are overriding this build rendering and post create. And in this build rendering, we are invoking a function in which we are manually creating a DOM tree. In this case, we are building a very simple DOM tree which just contains a single button. Okay, and in post create, we associate an event handler, this increment function, to this widget. Okay, so that is a relatively straightforward and simple coding. Okay, so let's move on to the next. So as I said before, building your DOM tree for your widget is very tedious work. Here we created a very simple DOM tree which contains a single button element. But if you're building relatively complex widget, it might actually have more elements in its DOM tree, and creating them by manually in JavaScript code is rather difficult. So here we are going to use a template. So what is a template? Template is HTML fragment that represent the DOM tree. Okay, so instead of manually creating the DOM tree yourself using JavaScript, you are going to use HTML fragment that represents that DOM tree. Now, the way that you can take advantage of a template is by extending another base class called either templated. This is supported until, well, actually it is still supported in 1.7. But 1.7 also introduced what is called a templated mix-in. Okay, so you can use either of this as your base class for using template. So let's see the code. So template mix-in or templated, basically it takes HTML template. So this is an example of HTML template. Here again we are building a very simple DOM tree which just contains a single element. But again, if you have a relatively complex the template, then this is basically you're providing the HTML fragment. Okay. All right. So basically, what it does is that by using this template string property of this template mix-in, this template mix-in will take this fragment, HTML fragment, and will build the DOM tree for you. In fact, it's going to implement build rendering method for you. Inside this build rendering, it will take this one and then will create a DOM tree for your widget. Okay, so this is what I just said. It takes HTML template specified in template string property here and then create a DOM tree, okay, inside this build rendering method. Okay, all right. So let's do our second exercise. So this is our second exercise. It's going to actually behave exactly the same. Okay, but this time we are going to build our widget using a template rather than building the DOM tree ourselves using JavaScript code. Okay, so let's take a look at that code. So here we are building the same widget counter, but this time in addition to widget base, we are also extending template mix-in. So by having template mix-in, now you can take advantage of the property called the template string. So this property is coming from this base class of template mix-in. Now here you can specify HTML fragment. Here typically you are going to have this one in a separate file, but this the demo purpose we are inlining this HTML fragment. Okay, so this represent this represent DOM tree. Okay, so again, if you have a relatively complex DOM tree, then having this one as a string is going to be a lot more convenient than creating it by using JavaScript code. Okay, so here again we have a single element called button. Okay, and then rest of the code is the same. So here again we are associating this increment, the callback function, this one, to this DOM node. So whenever this widget, so this DOM node is representing the widget, okay, the root node of that widget DOM tree. Okay, so whenever that widget gets on-clicked, you are invoking increment, and its incrementing is basically incrementing the value of this I, which is a counter here, and then setting into HTML node. Okay, so again, it's exactly the same code. Instead, exactly the same code as the first one, except that now we are taking advantage of template. Okay, all right, so hopefully that is clear. Okay, so let's move on to the third scheme, attach points. So attach point is any element in your template code. So here we have a little bit more complex the DOM tree. So we have a dev element, and inside the dev element we have a button element, and also we have a span element. So we have a three element: dev, button, and span. Okay, now if you want to if you want to actually invoke any of this element, whether it is a div or button or span, you can use data dojo attach point by providing the name. Okay, and then you can make a reference to any of this element, okay, by using the value specified in data dojo attach point. This dev is actually root node. Okay, so this could be actually invoked by this.dom node, but you can also specify data dojo attach point my first div or something like that. Okay, so since we are not using this dev, we don't actually attach any, we don't have attach anything, but we are going to invoke this button and this span, okay, in the rest of the code. So here, this is an example where we are invoking this button. So what it wants to do is, here we want to associate the button. So instead of the whole widget, we want to associate a button for this increment function. Okay, so in our previous example, the event handler is invoked. Okay, so actually let me show the code. Event handler is invoked to the whole widget, which is represented by this DOM node. Okay, but in this case, in this third case, what we want to associate our event handler is not the whole widget, but this just button. So we need to have a way to make a reference to this button, and that's where we are going to use data dojo attach points. So I'm attaching my button, the name of my button, to this button. So in the rest of the code, I can actually invoke this button by using .myButton. So what happens is that whenever you are using data dojo attach point with this value, is going to create a property called myButton for this widget object. Okay, so widget object should have myButton property and myCounter property. So that's the reason you should be able to invoke those elements by using this.myButton or this myCounter. Okay, so hopefully that is clear. So let's do our third exercise. So let's run this third case first, okay, and then let's take a look at the code. So this is the attach point exercise. So now we have button element, and then we have this span element, which is representing this value, and this whole thing is a widget. Okay, so now if I click this one, you can see the value of this counter is actually being incremented. Okay, so let's see the code. So here we are, again, we are extending widget base and template mix in. So since we are extending template mix in, we should be able to take advantage of template string property. So here we defined DOM tree for the widget. So here, as I said before, root node is div, and then we have a button, then we have count string, and then we have this value. And we are associating my button to this button and my counter for this span element. So again, what it does is basically creating a property called the my button and my counter for these widget objects. So here we are invoking my button property with this my button, and then here whenever increment function is invoked, we are also using my counter property of this widget, and then we are setting in HTML with this counter value. Okay, all right, so hopefully that is clear. Let's move on to the next. Okay, so next you can attach event handlers. So examples we have seen so far is that you are attaching event handlers inside post create. Okay, now you can actually associate, you can attach event handlers more directly by using data dojo attach event. Okay, so any element in your template can specify an event handler by specifying a special attribute called a data dojo attach event. So in this case, for the button, we want to associate event handler, meaning we want to attach event handler by using data dojo attach event, and this is the event type, and then this is the function that you want to invoke. Okay, so this is a little bit more simplified than previous exercise in which you actually attach event handler inside post create but using Dojo Connect. But here you can directly associate event handler to whatever element of your choice, in this case for button, and we are associating this increment. Okay, so this one should work exactly the same. Okay, all right, so let's actually try that one. Attach event handler, and it should work exactly the same. All right, moving forward. Next, variable substitution. So what is variable substitution? So far, we have not defined our own attributes, meaning properties, for our custom widget. However, you could. So here, I'm actually defining two properties called my CSS style and start value. Okay, so these are custom properties of your widget. Okay, and then in your template, if you want to make a reference to any of your property, then you can actually use this $ notation. Okay, so here for my button, I want to use my CSS style of my button using this $ notation. Okay, and for the counter, I want to use a start value property, so I'm using this the $ and start value. Okay, so this is a variable substitution. So these are in fact variables, and it's actually referencing whatever properties that you have in your widget. All right, so let's do the next one. So let's do the exercise. So number 5, variable substitution. So let's see how it works. Okay, so here I'm actually substituting the starting value with the start value property, and then I'm actually setting this press me button with a special class. Okay, so again, if I click this one, it will increment the value, and let's see the code. This variable substitution. Okay, so here we introduced 2 new custom properties for this widget. So we have my CSS style, which is called my button, which is actually defined right here. So my button's style is basically setting the background to yellow. Okay, and then we also introduced start value property for this widget. Okay, so inside your template, what you can do is you can make a references these properties by using this notation, $ in my style and $ start value. Okay, so this is the substitution of. So instead of hard-coded value, you can make a reference to properties of your widget by using this variable substitution scheme. Okay. So if you want to actually change this one to, my button to pink, maybe. And let's run the code. I probably install it. So rebuild it. Okay, and then run it again. Variable substitution. Now this is actually something I changed, I rebuild it and restart the code, right? However, somehow the change is not reflected because it's actually using cache. Okay, so what you have to do is, in this case, Chrome, you have to remove previous cache. Okay, so in order to see the change, so the way you can do is you click this one and go to settings, and then select under the hood, and then clear browsing data. Okay, and here you are going to empty the cache of the past hours. So I'm going to clear browsing data. Okay, and then I'm going to refresh. Okay, now you can see the change is reflected. Okay, so in fact, when you do the homework, make sure you are clearing this cache. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna actually change it back to yellow. All right, so that is variable substitution. So let's move on to the next. External template file. So far, what we have done is, we actually inlined the template code, HTML fragment right inside right inside your template, the definition code. So, but typically you are going to have your template code in a separate file. So in this case, I want to have my template file called my counter on the templates subdirectory. So the way that you can make a reference to external file that contains your template is by using Dojo text and exclamation mark, and then you specify the directory where you have your template. Okay, and then you are going to receive that as an argument. In this case, I'm going to just call it template, and then you can specify template for your template string. So instead of having the inlined template code right here, you're actually separating out that code into a separate file. In this case, my counter HTML file. Okay, so let's run that code. It should actually work exactly the same. Okay, external template. Okay, it works exactly the same. Okay, but we defined a new file. So I basically what I've done is I take out that template into a separate file called the my counter.html on the templates directory. Okay, and then here, so this is the template code, and then here basically I'm making a reference to that template file. Okay, again here I'm using Dojo text exclamation mark. This is a plugin, and then I'm specifying the location of the template file, and then I take it as a template, and then I specify template like this. Okay, and rest of the code is exactly the same. Okay, so this is typically the practice that you will see. So template will be in a different file. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next. Okay, so this is what we just have done. Now, in addition to a template file, you typically have other aspects for your widget, like a CSS file and images. And you want to have those CSS files, your styling in a separate CSS file. And also if you have an image, it should be also in another file. Okay, so in this case we are going to actually separate out CSS styling in a separate file. Okay, so again, it's usually a good practice to have a CSS and image files out of your widget definitions. Okay, so that CSS and images could be used in different widgets. Okay, so that is this exercise number 7. So let's try this, and it should work exactly the same. This time I'm actually using green. Okay, so here, if you take a look at the code, here external CSS file. So I'm actually referencing my widget.css external file. So here I define that my widget.css file right here, and this is basically containing a single styling called my button, and I'm using green. Okay, as a background color. Okay, so that is number 7. All right, so our last step is mapping widget attributes to DOM node attributes. So basically, often widget attributes are mapped into widget's DOM node attributes, and most of the time the mapping happens automatically. However, there might be some cases that you have to explicitly specify mapping to those widget attributes. For example, in HTML or class, overriding default behavior. Okay, so let's see the examples. So let's take a look at the code. So let's run this code first. So you can see we have basically, the press me and count, and then we have this name and phone number. Okay, and this one has a name, phone number, and something else as well. And here we are using special CSS class. Okay, so let's see the code, and we'll actually take a look at this the output one more time. Well, not this one. I'm looking at this one. So we have defined other at the stylings. Okay, so let's see. So here we define other attributes, other properties called the name and name class and phone. And each of these property has another function called underscore set name attribute, set name class attribute, same phone attribute, and then it specifies the node and type. Okay, so basically, what we are saying is this attribute. Whenever you're setting this attribute, I'm actually setting this DOM node and the type of this. Okay, so so whenever you're setting this name class, I'm actually setting the name node, this DOM node, and the type is a class. Okay, so now if you actually take a look at this inline template file, we have added 2 more div elements. Okay, so you can see this data Dojo attach point is name node, and this is phone node. Okay, so these are basically the DOM node. This name node and phone node is representing elements of this element. Okay, so this dev element is going to be represented by this name node, and this dev element will be represented by phone node. Okay, all right. So now what happens is here you go. So this is the code I'm actually looking for. So in addition to data Dojo type, I'm also actually setting the properties. Okay, by using data Dojo properties. So meaning I'm actually setting this name property with this value and phone property with this value. And for this guy, I'm actually setting name property with this value and phone property of this. And this one, I'm actually setting in addition to name and phone, I'm also setting name class. So these properties will be taken and will be set to this DOM node, name node and phone node. Okay, so basically it is setting the values of the so in this case phone node. What I will do is it will take the value of this phone node. Okay, 1, 2, 4, 3, 3, and 5, 5, 5, and it will be used to set this node, the phone node, this phone node in HTML. So it will be taking this value, and then for this div element, for this element, it will actually set the value of this inner HTML from these property values. Okay, so that is what you're actually seeing right here. Okay, now in this case, we are also actually setting something else. So this is the case that we are also setting name class. Okay, so meaning it will take the value of this name class property, special employee name, okay, and then it will actually use that one to set the class attribute of this name node. Okay, so that's basically changing the name node class to this in this case the value is the special employee name. So special employee names class is color red. That's the reason you're actually seeing this is actually reflecting the new class style. Okay, so this one you might have to actually spend some time actually looking into this code and understand it. Okay, so probably the number 8 is probably the most complex, the situation. But again, if you take a look at the code and see how things work, it's not that hard to understand it. Okay, so that's pretty much what I have. I have actually a couple of more advanced features in mind, but it's not actually covered in the hands-on lab and in the lab documentation. For those of you who are looking at the lab documentation, each of that step is actually documented. Okay, so if you actually go over here, you can see the key points highlighted. Okay, so I recommend you to the hands-on lab. Now the homework is so homework is, now whenever you click something, you want to compute a total. So it's going to it will just add whenever you clicked it, it will just increment by 1. So it will, once you click once, it will be 6. If you click twice, it will be 7. If you click 3 times, then it will be 8. So it's going to be total. And so basically, you're going to actually add this total to number 8. Okay. So I actually explained, how you can clear this cache so that you can see the change. Okay. So if you do not see the change, as I mentioned before, it's highly likely because browser is using cache. Okay. So you want to clear the cache, as I explained in this homework. All right. So